an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Elder Empire Shadow Book 1 of Shadow and Sea, chapters 16, 17, and 16, 17, 18, and 19. In these chapters, Calder just shows up with a fucking crown on his head and he can just tell people to kneel and they do, except for Shera. Why is that? Is it just because she read the fine print a little bit more? Is it just because the Emperor told her, even if you have to protect them from me, is she the only one he ever said that to? What's up? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to George for commissioning this episode. George is here in the chat, as are a bunch of people. I am really, really enjoying this so far. I feel like these chapters, we start to really get into more of the lore that I wanted to know about, especially regarding awakening of objects, which is, it's really, I know I keep talking about this, but it is really fun to see the thematic connections between Will's writing in this universe and the Cradle iteration. There's just a lot of alignment, and you can see some of the things that he continues to be interested in are the stealing of your enemy's power, focus and intention, and a willpower, really. The willingness to put in the work and do it the hard way for long-term results, which is one of those things that we all recognize the value of and the virtue of, but very few of us actually possess that kind of willpower in reality. And we may possess it in different amounts for different things as well. And it's it's one of those where I would love to be that way. And yet, I've often said that if you told me it would take almost 10 years for Unspoiled to become profitable enough for me to make it a full-time job, I don't know that I would have gotten here, because that sounds like it's just, a lifetime away, 10 years. And I just managed to get through it because I didn't really stop to think about it as I was doing it. I was just doing it. And I feel like the people who push through with willpower they have that mindset more, I overthink, and that sort of pulls you out of it and gets you too wrapped up in the overall, So we have here, chapter 16 starts off with the assassination of this alchemist who is, first of all, bonkers. Second of all, super cruel. Third of all, really smart. And obviously exceptionally talented also. And the three of them are sent to assassinate this guy together as a group by the Emperor. Because the Emperor is like, hey, what'll be hard? Killing this dude who has escaped several times now. To which all three of them are like, was it? They take this guy down so easily. It's truly insulting a little bit, I think, to all of them, how quickly this is taken care of. And as we find out, there were some creatures, some homunculi, that they were meant to have run into, about a dozen of them, very large, that should have presented quite a challenge. But because they didn't, approach the assassination the way the Emperor anticipated, they never actually ran into them at all. So they sidestepped that whole thing. It's kind of like, a D&D setup where the DM has all of these creatures prepared inside the castle. And then you just climb to the roof without ever going into the castle, and there's just not a lot that they can do other than try and make it really hard for you, and it didn't work. So this guy, too, it turns out, is like a monster. We get a few different looks at his history. Albedo Crane was one of the few men alive to have deceived not one, but 2 imperial guilds. First, he trained under the magisters, claiming an academy education and a noble lineage, neither of which existed. Shortly before he was to earn his staff, the magisters learned of his betrayal and confronted him, only to find his room empty and scrubbed clean. He had left days before. Using the same document forging skill that had gotten him so far in life, Crane lied his way into Canitalia, I think is how you say it, the Guild of Alchemists. Though Crane spent 5 years among their number, they never spotted his deception. Fortunately, the alchemists proved themselves better at recognizing shattered minds than forged documents. After the 4th release of Albedo Crane's Miracle Elixir coincided with the 4th disappearance of guild acolytes, the alchemists called for his dismissal and arrest. What was he doing with them? Do I want to know? I suspect I don't. But that sounds sinister AF. Shattered minds and disappearance of acolytes. Can people's minds just be made into ingredients? Like, oh, I really, 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 just the what's the word I want? The implications of that are really troubling. I really hated the whole idea of it. And then we have, like, he is dismissed, not arrested. He moves to the countryside and gets this, like, castle, and nobody knows how he got his hands on it. Here, he continued his experiments, crossing the intent of a mad reader with the cruel poisons of an unhinged alchemist. Nearby farmers disappeared at an alarming rate, but no one noticed. Not until the local governor and mayors of various regional villages scraped together enough coin to hire the consultants. And this is one of those things that somebody the other day phrased something in such a way that I was like, oh, God, that is really true. And I almost think it was somewhere in the chapters that I read for last episode. But it was, they couldn't scrape together the money to purchase the assistance of the law. And I think that was from this book. But it really hit me all of a sudden how, like, we have laws in place that are alleged to protect people, but unless you can pay somebody to represent you effectively, the law doesn't matter. It just doesn't. It's completely out of your reach to have that enforced on your behalf, which is banana pants. Like, though putting it in terms that bald, I was just suddenly startled at the injustice of it. Like, you always know that we need to be able to afford a lawyer. But when you really think about the fact, like, well, you can't get help at all unless you have that. And so these people, if they hadn't had the money to hire consultants, how long would this guy have just been able to proceed unchecked? You know, and that is really how it works, unfortunately, in the world. Until the emperor had decided that this presented a unique opportunity for his 3 personal gardeners, they had mobilized every mason, shepherd, and gardener left on the island. So they go in, just the 3 of them. And Michael in the chat says, any broken law that can be just paid for via fine is just a law against the poor. 100%, Michael. And money bail, which is also bullshit. Jan says, Shera was never in awe of the real emperor either. And Sammy says, remember, she kind of was able to resist the emperor's commands on their first day together as well. Yeah, I'm wondering if that has something to do with her missing piece that she thinks about. Because there's something's up with fucking Shera, man. And I can't put my finger on what it could be, but, you know, it's not, it's weird. So Shera's in this trunk, ice cold, by herself, and Lucan and Maya are supposed to come in and help distract this guy so that she can attack him. And they are late, and she is getting fucking irritable about it. And it begins to rain on top of it all, and she's just like, God damn it. And she starts cursing everybody, and then she gets to Lucan's name, and she's like, well, she could forgive Lucan. And I was like, of course she can. I love the fact that Maya at one point is just like, girl, we know that you want to bang. Like, it's not even really like that. There's not a sexual vibe of coming off of Shera, but, you know, that's what we all say as shorthand. You like him. And Shera gets, like, embarrassed, but Maya is kind about it, and it's just like, that's fine. It's fine. Just don't be an idiot about it, okay? Just as long as you can just not be an idiot, it's fine. Appreciate you, Maya. So, this bit... A metal grate burst open a few yards down the wall, and Crane leveled his copper staff. So, Lucan comes out. His skin, it says his dark skin smeared with some luminous orange fluid. He looked uncomfortable, but at least he was alive. And as we find out later, this fluid and another one were meant to sort of combine to create a chemical reaction that would, like, burn him alive. And he just managed to sidestep that happening. So good for you. And then we have Maya vaulting over the wall. The heel of her descending foot caught Crane on the wrist, sending the vial crashing to the stone. It broke open and sizzled, raising a cloud of caustic-smelling smoke inches from Shera's hiding place. So this is when he's like, "This is my castle, worms! But while you're here, why don't I give you the tour?" And I was like, oh my god, dude, get over yourself. That was when Shera jumped out of the chest and cut his throat. She used both her shears at the same time just to be sure. This is before her shears took on some power that started to make her feel like she was going nuts. And Maya shoves him off the side of the wall, and he just falls to the ground. And I'll tell you what, I kind of wondered if it wasn't going to turn out that he was, like, still alive, because they kept talking about how it seemed like it was a little bit too easy. And I was like, has anybody looked over the wall? Is this going to be like a Michael Myers thing where it seems like he's dead and then you look over again and he's gone? Because, you know. And Shera asks Lucan, so how's your conscience doing? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. I can hear the screams from everybody he experimented on echoing from every single brick in this entire castle. So fuck that guy. And Shera feels relief and realizes that she was sort of carrying an anxiety about Lucan's answer that she didn't even realize she was carrying. She wants to feel his approval, you know? There is nothing like that moment when you start to realize that you want somebody's approval on things. And there's just a real feeling of like, shit. Or maybe that's just me. So yeah, this is when they talk about whether or not this was like a little too easy. And Maya got her arm like practically ripped off because of some guard dogs, and drinks this potion that starts to like move it by itself back into place. Really like awesome, but also sounds horrifying. Let's see, here it is. So she says, who's going to take care of the castle? Maya says. And Shera is like, didn't you place the charges? She did, Lucan said, intervening before Maya could snap back. But this place is defended against alchemical charges. He's invested every inch of the stone and some of the moisture in the air to deaden explosions. Which, that's rad. Some of the moisture in the air. Well, all right. I really, like, you know, just little moments like that. I'm like, what an imagination. So she tells Lucan, all right, well, I guess you're the one that's going to have to go and take care of this then. And he returned the smile as he stripped off his gloves and knelt to press his palms against the castle. Maya and Shera hopped over the side of the wall. Shera had to descend the old-fashioned way, digging for grooves in the stone with tips of her gloved fingers. But Maya just jumped straight down. And Shera is like, oh, man, I remain a little envious, even though I know I would never want to fucking go through what she went through, not for $1 million. But it is awesome. Behind them, the castle started to shake. He could have taken this assignment alone, Shera commented, just brought the whole castle down from the very beginning. Maya rolled her eyes. Any of us could have. In, kill the alchemist, out. This was to test how we work as a team. And this is when she says we couldn't have brought down the castle without alchemical charges. Yes, he walks on clouds and sings with the voice of an angel. You see him special. Your heart's in your eyes. You're stitching your names together on a pillow. That's fine. But don't let it affect your appraisal of the situation at hand. And finally, Cher's like, all right, maybe we didn't need him. But Maya, she has some grace about it. I do think that this was too simple. I don't really know what was going on. So here comes a moment that I just loved so much. They go to see the Emperor. And because of this scene, you guys, I know I've said before in other episodes of things too, sometimes I'll have an actor's face lodged in my brain for a certain character. And it doesn't happen with every character. And sometimes the actor will change abruptly due to something happening or a description that I missed, But the Emperor in this scene gave me such Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine energy. So, for those who haven't seen that show, please do yourself a favor. It is propaganda, but nevertheless, it's fun. So he asks about the homunculi, and they just say that they never ran into them. And nonetheless, I'm glad you've returned. Something significant has happened. It has left me quite disturbed, as I'm sure you've noticed. He sipped some more tea. What's happened to you? Shera asked in mock horror. You're a wreck! The Emperor nodded, as if to concede a point, unaware of the irony. I do apologize for that. I'm sorry, guys. I love this so much. It's just, he's Captain Holt. That's who he is to me now. That's it. I don't know. I don't think there's any coming back from that. So this is when he says, I have something that I need to tell you guys about my whole thing. And I can't tell anybody else about this. And here comes this thing. This is such a fucking bold statement. He asks them first, before he makes the statement, what they know about Nicothi. And Lucan's response is only what everyone knows. And the Emperor is like, yeah, I don't know what that means. I literally killed Nicothi before, and he says, before her death throes leveled a continent and created the Ion Sea. And Shera has a moment of just being like, mother of God, I just keep forgetting who the fuck this man is. He just looks like a dude. And then he'll say some shit like that, and she's like, oh, right. You are an unthinkable being of power and age that I can't comprehend. I keep I gotta keep it in mind. So Lucan says, I know that Nicothi was one of the last of the great elders to rule before you united humanity. She ruled the domain of birth and death and often tried to combine the two. The Luminians exterminated the last of the Dead Mother's cults almost 200 years ago. Some say it is Nicothi's touch that causes stillbirths, and when a corpse seems healthier than it was in life, it is burned to prevent Nicothi from claiming it as a vessel. Maya piped up. Highness, I've heard that Nicothi waits at the bottom of the Aeon alongside Calarak. The Emperor looked up sharply. One day we will have a longer conversation regarding that rumor. And I'm like, oh, will we? Because I don't like that reaction at all. That sounds to me like there's something to it. And having Nakothi be dead, but her heart still be out here and active, that's already not what I want. But Nakothi just like biding her time at the bottom of the sea, no, I don't think so. I would rather not. I decline. So he asks for 3 chairs to be brought in, and they all gather to have a cozy little chat. And he tells them he was born in Nakothi's territory, the Heartlands, the birthplace of humanity. And she had little use for living humans, so we scraped out our lives as best we could. And he describes her and the stitching them back together. And at this point, these 3 haven't seen these in person yet. But I have to imagine that being told about how this works comes in no way close to actually seeing the horror of it in person. So, everything I've told you up to this point is historical fact. It's nothing you couldn't have pieced together. And then he holds the cup, and he says, what I will tell you now is a secret I haven't told another living soul in centuries. He held the teacup on his palm, and it began to shiver. After a moment, little white specks peeled away and drifted off on the wind. More and more specks joined them until the teacup and the tea inside it dried up and crumbled away to ash. Shera found the display unusually disturbing. This information is vital not only to the security of the Empire, but to my personal survival. I know you are all aware of this, so I have never emphasized it before, but I tell you now, if I suspect you have leaked this story without my express authorization, I will kill you. I will have those who heard the story executed. I will print an official refutation in all Imperial news outlets, and I will put on a public display to shame and discredit your claims. Your names will be stricken from the record of Imperial citizens, and from the very stones I will strip all memory of your existence. And damn, it's one thing to be like, I want you dead. I want your family dead. I want your house burned to the ground. And it's another thing to be like, I'm going to make you an unperson. I'm going to disappear you and make it like you just never were. And the very land you stepped on will carry no trace of you. Ooh, damn. So, at this point, he tells them the truth about how he has Nakothi's heart. And this is how he stays alive forever. And that is what Maya was talking about with her mother, and the fact that he had to fight against madness every second of every day. And it's really interesting because, you know, when you hear about somebody who's struggling to keep eternal life, and they say, oh, without me, the Empire would fall apart, it's really easy to be like, shut up. No, it wouldn't. You're full of shit. You just want to live forever because that's what people want. Not everybody, but you know, it's like one of those things. And it's a selfish thing that you're trying to act as if it's altruistic. And you're not fooling anybody, so get the fuck over yourself. But in this case, I think that he's like being as honest as he can be. You know, he's like, I'm literally the only person that ever beat her. And I brought humanity together, and it's a fragile fucking thing, without me still being alive to remind everybody why we do this and have like a point for us all to focus on. I don't know what would happen. So yeah, I'm keeping myself alive so that she doesn't get control of the planet and humanity again. Just sorry, but not sorry. And I was like, all right, you know what? You won me over. So then we go to 17. And we have the conversation between Maya and Shera as they toss around Nikothi's heart, discussing what Maya's mother told her and the state of the empire. Now, because I have a fair amount to get through and I'm already halfway through my time, I am not going to dwell too much on this because we've talked a lot about the implications of what her mother said about the empire being broken and over and done with already. But Shera is much more of the opinion that everybody united is a better idea. Maya thinks that breaking off into smaller, basically like countries, would be advantageous and everybody could individually look after themselves and then come together when they are all facing a threat that is equal amongst them all. And Shera is like, yeah, here's the thing though. We used to have like the one person who was in charge and they were so powerful that even though it was our one weak spot, he was just so strong that we weren't worried about it. Now we're going to have a bunch of weak points. And I don't know, this seems like it's much less certain to me. Shera couldn't help but think that a world without the Empire would be far too chaotic. What would keep the bigger regions from taking over the smaller ones? Who would force the different regions to help each other in the event of a global emergency? I'll tell you who. Nobody. You'll create all kinds of guilds and councils and shit, and they're all gonna say it won't work. It just won't. And they'll mean well. Everybody will mean well, and it'll be the most frustrating thing in the world, and you'll hate it and curse everybody all the time over it. So, Shera, look. I'm not trying to like say New World Order and shit, but I totally get her and I understand. She's not wrong. That's what's so annoying. People are stupid. That's the problem, you know? And they're like frightened animals that you just whisper a hint of something and they just go fucking nuts with it. And it's, anyway. So we have some more of Shera being envious of Maya because she's just dancing around on these fucking treetops like it's nothing. And then Carrion comes up to them and she tells them, our scouts in the Aeon have reported a navigator's ship headed this direction. The Testament. Calder Martin's ship. And Shera is just like, sink it. Obviously. And as soon as she starts on this, Maya's like, the champion will be coming for me. I'll fight him. They're both talking about all the ways they're going to face these guys. And finally, Carrion is like, excuse me, bitches, shut up. No, we're not doing any of that. This guy may want to hire us. Reminder, he has money. We want it. So we're going to treat him like a potential client. And that's the way this shit works. I don't know if you've forgotten all of that. And there's a moment where Shera's just like, what the fuck? And then quickly goes, oh, no, okay. That makes sense. I came to warn you, Carrion continued. I want you to be prepared when he gets her in case we fail to reach a mutually beneficial conclusion. Yeah, well, they do. So this is when let's see. I'll be handling Calder Martin myself, so if anything goes wrong, I expect I'll have him and his crew killed. As you know, I like to be prepared for every possibility. And there was a thing about the way that she like casually said that I was just like, my God, Carrion. She can be a tiny bit scary in her way, you know? So when she took the heart to Lucan that evening, she would tell him what was coming. Maybe he could speed up the process, and she was worried for nothing. But if not, he might be able to give her another weapon. So when she goes to Lucan with the heart, he's like, dude, I need 3 days. Like, tomorrow morning, it's not happening. And the architects can't have finished their, like, protective box that they're making either. So, let's see, at its current level, the heart will eat through this intent in minutes. And then she says, do what you can, and she pulls out the shear that has been giving her problems. And there's something interesting here. The voice of the knife in her mind was becoming stronger and more distinct from Nikothi. The laughter, the whispers, they didn't sound feminine anymore. They sounded richer, deeper, less like Nikothi, and more like the Emperor. She wasn't sure why, and it was beginning to disturb her. So she pulls out the blade and tosses it into Lucan's cell and is like, what can you do with that? And we get a little bit of a look here. Lucan had invested her shears many times over the years, bringing out their power, preparing them to be awakened. But he had never taken the final step. Awakening was a permanent process. It would make the blade more powerful, but less predictable. And there was no going back. There was a reason why no gardeners had awakened their blades since the founding of their guild. And I was like, wow, none of them. Like, you know, as we find out later, awakening an object that you've gotten to know really well, that you've carried a long time, is a means of soul binding yourself, which I am not sure if that is what happens to her, because we don't see her get the blade back after he's done with it. I have to imagine that there's a danger of it, though. Like, is she aware? She has to be aware, right? She must know that's a potential outcome of him awakening it, is being bound to it, which will make it more powerful. And that's the point of awakening it, right? Like, or can awakening it without being bound to it still give it its own power? Anyway, okay, so I'll get there in a second. He asks her straight up, do you want me to awaken it? And she isn't sure. She thinks over everything and how many times that she's been outmatched recently. And she's just genuinely starting to get a little bit afraid. Like, I don't think she'd classify it as afraid, but I really think when you come down to it, that's what it is. I don't know, she said finally, but you don't have time to finish sealing the heart, and I need an edge. If I keep fighting like this, eventually I'm going to lose. She had almost said die, but she remembered in the last second to hold back for Lucan's sake. And I was really wondering how much of that is Lucan's sake. Like, it feels like she means it in the moment that it was for him. I don't think that Shera's afraid of thinking of death. Like, she faces that all the time. Even here, when they find out what their mission is in a later chapter, and Lucan's like, aren't you afraid? And she's like, I'm no more afraid now than I am every day at all of the many things that could kill us all the time. So, no? So, this is when he tells her that Joran Cursebreaker is coming to the island, which gives her a great deal of hope. He's the one that made the box that was originally supposed to hold the heart. And I really hope that Lucan, makes it clear that destroying the heart is not what we actually want to do here. I'm sure he will. And I think that what she has, because we saw her with the handing it around the island thing that they were doing with different shepherds and stuff in the trees, the news must be circulating that destroying it is off the table, so I think that that's probably known at this point, but just made me kind of go, I hope that we're in good communication with this guy. So let's see. It will take him at least another week to get here, no matter how fast he travels, but he should be on the way. Shera considered before shaking her head. I can't. I might be needed today. His grip on her shoulders tightened. Shera, I know you want to stay, but I'm not sure you should. It wants you here. That's more than enough reason for you to leave. And that's something later on when she keeps hearing it whisper, wait, stay. She doesn't know what it means by that. She questions a little bit, what does it even mean when it's asking me to stay? And that makes me sort of worry about her being sort of targeted in this way. I don't know, if it's starting to feel a little bit personal to me. You know what I mean? So Let's see. Her blade and Nakothi's heart were whispering in unison. This is when she hears it say, wait. Shera backed up from Lucan, breaking his grip. We have to do something. The entire island is in danger. We can't wait for Joran to save us. Without knowing why, she found herself standing outside the next cell door, looking in on Jyrene Tessela Martin. This scene is so funny. I feel so bad for her in some ways. Jyrene is like, she's just like a really overeager Jehovah's Witness, where it's clear she was taught a sort of script to share whenever anybody shows interest. And she's been kind of waiting for her moment. And Shera's showing up at her cell door and being like, what's your deal? What the fuck is up with you guys? Worshipping the elders? Like, why? What do you do it for? This is her opening. This is the moment. She's not going to get a better cue than this. Humans are fundamentally selfish, aren't we? Jyrene said eagerly. No matter what else we do, when it comes down to moments for action, we always act for ourselves. We spend our whole lives worshipping one person. She was growing more animated, more excited, as though she'd waited for weeks to deliver this speech. Shera said nothing, letting the cultist go on. And where has that gotten us? Jyrene continued. Everyone agrees that it would be better if we were more charitable, more virtuous, nicer to our fellow man. But we don't change. We advance. We make discoveries. But the basic nature of humanity remains the same throughout the centuries. She held up a single finger. There is only one truly selfless act, and that is anything done in the service of humanity as a whole. For all mankind, for everyone, present and future, whether or not we ever see a benefit for ourselves. Yeah, okay. Solid agreement. Absolutely believe this is true. Like, let's take down capitalism. I'm on board. Let's do it. It sounded too good, actually, which meant that the bait was ready, and Jyrene was about to set the hook. Sure enough, she stepped forward and gripped the bars, looking at Shera from inches away with a face filled with rapture. The sleepless do not worship elders. We're not a cult, nor do we capture and examine them ourselves like the Black Watch do. Our goal is to communicate with the great elders, to establish a common understanding so that we can benefit from just the tiniest fraction of their wisdom. Not for ourselves, you understand, for all mankind. Jyrene finished the speech with a self-satisfied smile. That's not so bad, is it? Shera had wondered why she was fighting, and this was why. Because the alternative was to leave the world to people like this. She leaned back from the bars, loosening her arms, rolling her neck, and rubbing the ache in her wounded shoulder. She felt as though she'd been taking a long nap and had finally woken up. So you're idiots, Shera said out loud. Thanks, that's what I wanted to know. With her right hand, she reached back and pulled out her remaining shear. Shera, honestly, girl, I'm not mad at you. I can't deny that I've had this impulse myself. Look, just, I'm glad that you at least had the presence of mind to stop and think. I don't know what would have happened if you killed her. Maybe things would go smoother eventually, but as of right now, I do think it's the wrong call, but I understand the impulse, I'm just saying. So at this point, she stops herself, remembers that Jyrene might be a doof. She may be totally misguided, but she does seem to have the right intention here, and she can't fault her entirely for that. So she starts to turn around. And then Calder Martin walks in. This guy has a fucking crown on his head. And he walks in with this total confidence. And Shera's looking at him and sees that he's flanked by, first of all, he's got his second in command, the guy called Andal. Shortly behind him walked Dalton Foster, the grizzled old man with 2 pairs of spectacles hanging around his chest. Behind them, the hall was filled with consultants, including Hansen, Lucan's regular guard, and Carrion, wearing purple. Her eyes were filled with fury, and she had her shears in her hands, but she didn't attack. So, Shera goes into a fighting crouch, and Calder tells her on her knees. And it's like she feels the heaviness of the command and knows that she's under oath to obey the Emperor. But he had told her, protect the Empire, even if necessary, from me. So she doesn't kneel. And Calder is like, Shera, I told you to put down the knife. And she just grips it tighter. This is when Dalton Foster chimes in with, there, you see, that's all it should do. It's been working too well. And I am dying to know why Shera's the only one responding the way that he thinks everyone should be responding. It's one thing for Shera to be unique in that she has a resistance that nobody else seems to have, but he fully expects her resistance in everybody, which is wild to me. Like, why? Why is that not happening then? And instead of answering when she asks Calder, where did you get that? He looks over at Lucan. And Lucan gestures for her to move over. And as Calder comes at him, he chucks the box with it in there, through the bars, basically. She snatches it out of the air, and then she sprints the fuck out of there. He can order them to follow me, she thought, but he can't order them to do it well. And that is what is so fun about this next chapter, is that everybody's fighting her, but they're all, like, apologizing or, like, warning her. Like, Carrion's like, duck, at one point. Another guy, like, she goes after, and he's like, I'm sorry, as she, like, gets him in the gut with a knee. She's trying really hard to not kill anybody, and eventually she does have to. And she doesn't really feel, like, guilt over it. She's just kind of like, it's not my fucking fault. I did my best, but that asshole over there is the one that we got to lay the blame for. And I really appreciate that. This is one of those things where I can be a little bit too much like that, where I feel like this is not on me. This is on somebody else. And my conscience will be clear to a point where I almost feel like, is that bad that I, like, genuinely don't feel any guilt about this? Because then you'll read something like Dresden Files, where Harry's put in a position where he has to hurt somebody, and there's genuinely no, like, way to avoid it. And he'll go 2 books with just like, their lives weighed on me, it was my fault. And all I can be like is, it wasn't your fault. It was absolutely XYZ's fault. What are you doing? And we're supposed to, like, admire the fact that he's shouldering the responsibility to a degree, but I find it genuinely irritating sometimes. So I just really appreciate Shera being more of my mind here and there, where she'll just be like, not my fault, doing my best. And I'm just like, yeah, 100%, girl. Exactly. So we go back to chapter 18. And it's right after Shera has just found out about how the Emperor uses the heart to stay alive. And Shera is just a little bit, like, disappointed that that's all it is. She kind of wanted there to be no explanation and for there to be this ongoing mystery, which I completely understand. Maya's hands were trembling in her lap. Lucan had gone slack, eyes wide and staring at nothing. It was hard to tell with his dark skin, but it looked as though he'd gone a shade paler than normal. Compared to those two, Shera figured she was handling the news rather well. The Emperor continued his report without commenting on their reactions. 48 hours ago, the Black Watch reported that a member of their number had stolen certain sensitive documents regarding Nicothi and her spawn. 36 hours ago, he hired a navigator and set out into the Aeon. An informant aboard suggests that he means to travel into that sea to the location of Nicothi's corpse and remove another of her hearts. And this is when we find out that she has 12. Many are no longer viable, but if he can revive one, I am the only one alive who can bind himself to the heart of a great elder without going entirely mad. In the worst case scenario, we'll have an insane immortal wandering the earth doing the bidding of the dead mother. So this is when they talk about the security that he already has around the island. And Shera's like, if that's so, why do you need us? And he says, I'm not used to basing my decisions on intuition, but I feel we're not dealing with realistic odds tonight. As he clenched his fist around the heart, Shera could have sworn she heard distant whispers. And he nods and says, yeah, Nikothi's doing something. She's up to something. Behind the wall stood a set of ancient armor, lacquered to white, painted with the sun and moon crest of the Aurelian Empire. What? Excuse me? What? Oh, are we doing that? Osriel is this Osriel? Like, I have to assume if it's Aurelian. Where does the word Aurelian come from? First of all, because Osriel it's not like his name is Aurel. Is that the same? It's like, because it's white and blue, right? Or no, it just says white with sun and moon crest. Everybody in the chat is saying no. I'm pursing my lips. I know it's spelled differently. I don't know. Maybe Will White just really liked this name and he decided to go ahead and just reuse it. But I just wanted to register my side eye here. I just want you all to know I noticed it and I have feelings about it. Just saying. I feel like there's something. I don't know. So, here we go to the preparations that they need to go and deal with and the conversation between Lucan and Shera, where Lucan is really frightened and feeling like he's doing the thing where he just tries to prepare for everything and gathers all of this equipment in a very sort of like Lyndon-esque fashion. And he is trying to get a sense of her, and he comes to hug her and try and tell her how much she means to him, and she does not know how to react. And she just sort of stands still as he's hugging her and is like, shit, I don't know what to do. And then he reaches for her blades, and she has this immediate reaction because she perceives a threat. And she knees in between the legs and takes his blades before having a moment to be like, oh my God, he wouldn't hurt me. What the fuck was that? Why do I gotta be like this? And he says from the floor, I should have seen that coming. We spend every waking minute together, and there's no one else who's done what we've done. It's you and me, and maybe Maya. And I was like, ouch. And then the rest of the world. He picked up one of her shears, staring into it as if to find his reflection in the dull blade. You're like a sister to me, and a friend, and maybe something more. I don't know. My point is, I look at you 1 second and it's like you're perfect. And then you scare me. You go dark, and the person I know goes away. And this is the first time that Shera is just like, oh, fuck. Like, genuinely moved in a way that she doesn't want to feel right now. Something was different about her. A part was missing. A cog had been stripped away. Maybe Maxwell had taken it away from her, or maybe she'd been born without all the pieces that normal people got, but she was different, and she wasn't sure how to change, and not sure she wanted to. Lucan smiled. I can tell you one thing. If I had to put money on one of us making it through this mission alive, I'd bet on you. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm investing everything I can into your shears. I thought about awakening them, but I'm not sure we have the time. She doesn't even know how to say thank you. She doesn't know how to explain to him how much he means to her or how she feels about him. She just like leaves after saying thank you. And that's the end of that chapter. So then we go to the start of chapter 19. Let's say you want to become a soulbound. First, you get yourself something with power. Second, you need to know this thing inside and out. Third, get a reader to awaken your object. If you did it correctly, the object will become your vessel. You'll be a soulbound. Congratulations. If you didn't, you'll probably be dead. Awakening powerful artifacts isn't a game. So, we go back to Calder Martin in the prison. Stayed outside Lucan's cell for a long time, arguing with his wife. Lucan tried to write down most of it, but the stone wall did a surprisingly good job of muting sounds. So I found that really funny that he's over there literally like scribbling down the conversation. The equivalent of, your neighbors having an argument and you put the like video on your phone to record the sound. So he, at this point, pulls out Shera's knife that she left in his cell. And he is like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. I can't send her out there without like some sort of advantage. But I feel so much of Nakothi's influence in this blade that if it goes wrong, this blade could be like just as dangerous as Nakothi's heart and wind up just being another like incredibly dangerous artifact that we now have to deal with. Again, just like the heart. And it says the blade is aware of Lucan in its own rudimentary way, and it wants him. It can feel his strength, his willpower, his focused intent. If only it were capable, it would lunge from the table and bury itself in his throat. Yikes. In the chat, people are saying, we'll discuss the similarity of the Aurelian versus Aurelian. Aurelius comes from the angel who collected dust for God to create man, hence the janitor. We're made of dust. Why not? I just can't, he needed an angel to go collect dust. God, get up off your ass, Go get your dust yourself. Shut up. Get over yourself. What is with you and your servants? Go ahead, do it then. Tiresome. All right, so back to Lucan. He pulls his hand away, and he is really, breathing hard. Delving into the history of this blade with all of its fucking baggage is a chore. It's a lot. And as we see later, if it had gone badly, he could have died. And he doesn't, it seems like he's, aware of it and just trying not to think about it. And it's not until after he's done that he really seems to face that it could have killed him, The weapon was on the verge of awakening itself, but Lucan had to decide if he wanted to. So eventually, he decides that he is going to do it, but he has to really focus on exactly what he's asking for. I don't want to change its purpose. I want to channel it. I will learn this blade. I will know its very nature. And when I finally understand it, that is when I will bring it to life. So he begins to probe this. And we go for a time over to the fight with Carrion and Shera, which I don't have time. Really, there's no point in going beat by beat, except for the fact that eventually the box disappears. And the shepherd, she sends them out using part of what had remained of Calder Martin's orders to get them to listen to her. I love that she stops to try and help Carrion. And Carrion is like, what the fuck? Go after the heart. Don't you dare stop for me. Carrion just remains the MVP. I really enjoy her. Had one of the shepherds taken it while she was distracted? In that case, they would hide it somewhere on the island and listen to Nikothi's song. If Calder's crew had managed to take it, on the other hand, they would bring it back to their captain. He would give the heart to Naberius Claiborne, who would bond with it for immortality. The best bet would be to find a member of Calder's crew. So, we go then to Maya, who is fighting Orzaya. And she's like intending to just distract him and keep him happy by presenting a real challenge and thus keep him away from the main action. And she sort of asks him at one point, like, what are you even doing here? What do you want? To fight you, he declared. On the ship that first night, your friend ran away. Then on the cursed island, you ran away. You will not run this time. And this is the time where she finally sees what his vessel is. He leaps at her, and the leap is just, it should not be possible. And she realizes that means that he is bound to a sand-born hydra. The sand-born hydra was one of the chimera that the alchemists had used in enhancing her, but only as far as improving her strength and durability. She had none of its true power. In the wild, they were said to have developed the ability to control their weight. They could creep over dunes of sand without leaving a footprint or disturbing a single grain, or they could strike from the air with the force of a collapsing temple. That's awesome. I love that. I don't feel like I've heard a power put in that way before, but that's rad, and I am into it. So, we cut from there back to Lucan. Your power is mine, the blade whispered. I will give it to you, Lucan muttered back. You will need as much power as you can get to protect Shera. To take lives, the knife countered. You must take lives to protect Shera. To feed. In Shera's service. To break down barriers, any that stand in her way. To turn her against the powerful. Against any that threaten her. His head began to throb sharply. So he starts to get reader burn. And at this moment, fucking Gyrene. Lucan? Is there someone else there? Oh my god. Kill her. I swear to God, guys. Oh, this made me so anxious. I hated it. I was just, you know what, Gyrene? Like, I had been trying to be on your side to a degree, but as soon as you did this, that's it, kid. Get out. I'm not here for it. How is she even still in jail, by the way? Like, Calder's here. Did they not break her out? Did he not make them open the thing? Like, what's the deal? He tells her more than once to shut the fuck up. And it's not until the second time that it even sinks in at all. And then he froze at the sight of one particular memory that should have been significant beyond all others, but that he failed to find until now. Which I thought was interesting. I wonder why. Like, it seems almost like the fact that she interrupted helped him inadvertently, but I don't know how. And there's the bronze blade piercing a gray-green heart. Just next to this image was another. The blade piercing another heart, this one red and human, tucked inside layers of skin and muscle, which I think is the Emperor, I'm guessing. 2 kills, 2 different moments, inextricably linked. Lucan seized on those images, pouring all his intent into them, focusing their significance and giving them purpose. This is you. This is what you are. I am, the knife whispered. And he starts sweating. And it says he'd prepared for this moment for years. Everything he'd done for Shera, everything she'd done for him, everything they'd shared. It had all left echoes of their intent. He shared a connection to this weapon as deep as to his own shears, maybe deeper. It was just enough to make this awakening possible at all. Through his bond with Shera, he was bound to this blade. Everything was prepared. His intent was gathered, the blade's history waiting at the surface. He'd stacked the wood, soaking it in oil. Now he only needed to provide a spark. He drew on his desire, his need, his intent to make Shera as powerful as possible. He forced it all into the blade. Even the pain of reader burn forged his will, making him shout with effort. Wisps of pale green light sprung into being, floating around the knife like disembodied spirits. You are the taker of lives, the thief of secrets. You are that which turns power against power. You are the death of the powerful. You are called Siphron, the whispering death. With one final surge of intent, he slammed the weapon down into the ground. It sunk easily into the stone, spreading cracks that filled with green light. The room shook. He felt the power of the awakened weapon, but his reader's senses were so burned that it could have been nothing more than his imagination. And at this point, he collapses, like almost passes out. And he puts his gloves back on, which is compared to closing his eyes after staring directly into the sun, which was very evocative. I appreciated that explanation. And for the first time, he rolled over to look at the weapon he had helped create. Siphron had changed shape slightly. It looked longer and sleeker. And the blade, which had once been ancient battered bronze, now looked like a glass window. A window looking into some strange netherworld. At first glance, the blade seemed to be filled with solid green light, but closer inspection revealed the color came from the glowing handprints. Dozens and dozens of shining green hands pressed against the weapon from the inside, as though trying to push their way through into the world. It was a busy crowd, as some hands jostled their neighbors away and others shoved forward to press their palms against the transparent blade. Every inch of the hands where they touched the blade glowed bright green. So is this like all the lives that were taken? What? How does that work? So he wraps this up first in the rags that were around the heart. Then he wraps it in a blanket. He didn't want it to cause any accidents when he took it to Shera. And then he looks around and he's like, right, take it to Shera. How the fuck do I do that? And that is the end of the chapter. Him realizing that he needs to figure out a way out of his cell, which he had been able to manage that one time pretty easily. But things are in chaos right now, so I imagine that his guard isn't just going to saunter in and let him out. Or allow him to let himself out. So we're going to have to see what happens. I'm very excited about it, though. All right, I have to wrap. I'm over time as usual. Thank you again very much to George for commissioning this. I appreciate you. I hope that you guys have been enjoying the coverage. And I can't wait to see what happens next. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.